Hi everyone, my name is Crystal, and for my presentation, I wanted to focus on stress management. Now, the reason why I picked this topic is because I strongly believe it is something that we can all relate to. No matter your age or your gender, or whether you're in school or in your career, or like many of us, probably both, you probably felt stressed at some point in your lifetime. So I started to do some research and I found a very interesting article called Stress Management in Employee Performance that was published in the European Journal of Human Resource Management Studies. Like the title suggests, the article discussed how stress management has an impact on employee performance, and they did this by developing two frameworks, one on stress management and one on employee performance, identifying key concepts that fell under each framework, and then discussing how they correlated with each other. At the end of the study, the writers did find that there was a positive and significant influence between stress management and employee performance. Now, before we take a deep dive into those frameworks, I do want to take a moment to discuss how the article defined stress and employee performance. So, stress can be defined as an individual's adaptive response to a situation that is perceived as challenging or threatening to the person's well-being. Employee performance is the ability to achieve the set objectives within the required timelines and parameters. So, in essence, every organization is going to have different objectives, goals, or timelines that an employee has to meet. How an employee starts to respond to those work pressures will determine if it starts to manifest into stress. So if an employee does not know how to manage those work pressures, they're most likely going to start to experience stress. And stress can become a threat to an organization because employees that are stressed and don't know how to manage that stress will start to become ineffective in their workplace. And if they start to become ineffective, it's going to have a ripple effect into the organization where the organization as a whole is going to start to become ineffective as well. So that's why it's really important for managers and organizations to be aware of employee stress and be aware of how they need to manage those stress levels. So that's why it's very important that we're looking at stress management and employee performance together. So the first framework that the writers discussed was on stress management. And under stress management, they identified three key concepts. The first one being workload, the second role conflict, and then the third one being role ambiguity. So under workload, that just means that it's the amount of assignments and tasks that are being assigned to an employee. So when an employee is being assigned too many tasks, that can become stressful for the employee because they don't have sufficient time to do everything that's being assigned to them, and that can become stressful for them. On the other hand, if they're being assigned too little tasks, that can also be stressful for the employee because they're not feeling productive and useful, and they're not feeling like they're an asset to the organization. The second one is role conflict. So role conflict is when there are incompatible requirements and expectations that the employee receives from the supervisor or the manager. So this just means that the employee is receiving different requirements. There's inconsistency with what they're being told by one person and then what they're being told by another person, whether that's a manager, whether that's a director, whether that's a coworker. There is inconsistencies and there is not one, clear defined role for that employee. And that's when stress can start to arise for that employee. And that's when tensions can start to arise between coworkers and supervisors and managers. And all of that can contribute to that employee's stress levels as well. And then the last one is role ambiguity. So under this one, it means that the expectations, the requirements, and the objectives have not been clearly defined or identified to that employee by either their manager, their director, or their supervisor. And when an employee does not know exactly what is expected of them or what exactly they're supposed to be doing or accomplishing, that can become stressful for the employee because they're not feeling like they're being productive. And if they don't know how to be productive or what's expected of them, then they're most likely going to start getting feelings of stress, of uncertainty in their role. And so that unclearness and that uncertainty can also develop into stress when it comes to role ambiguity. So those were the three elements that they identified under the framework of stress management. Under the framework of employee performance, the writers identified three elements as well, those being effectiveness, efficiency, and commitment. So effectiveness is a broad concept for many organizations because every organization has different ways that they measure their effectiveness. But in essence, you want to make sure that an individual is being placed in a workplace setting where they are being effective. And if they are in a place setting that where they're being effective, then they're most likely going to be performing at higher levels as well. So that's the first one, effectiveness. The second one is efficiency. So with efficiency, it means that the employees' capabilities and valuable skills are being used to their maximum ability, and they're being used with good speed and good time, and that the employer is really utilizing that employee's capabilities, and that they're being efficient with their time and the resources that they have available to them. So that's efficiency. And then the last one is commitment. So commitment is when an employee is committed to that organization. They're committed to creating good work for that organization. They have created a bond of loyalty with that organization, and that's good. And organizations want to have that commitment from employees, because it will most likely mean that they're performing at higher levels because they want to stay with the organization. They don't want to be given a reason to get fired or let go. So those higher levels of commitment are going to be better for the organization, because it means that their employees are performing at higher levels as well. And in essence, when employees are performing at higher levels, there's also research that shows that they have higher job satisfaction levels as well. So usually when there's high commitment levels, people are satisfied with their jobs, people are being more effective and efficient, and that's why all of these three elements fall under that employee performance framework. So now that we've discussed the two different frameworks, the writers then started to identify how they correlated with each other. So for example, we can take workload. So when it comes to workload, the article discussed how it's really important that managers have an effective workload management strategy in place, because that has proved to improve all three elements under the employee performance framework. When employees are given the amount of work that they're capable of doing, they become more effective, they become more efficient, and they become more committed to the work that they're doing. So that's why it's really important that managers have these strategies in place. The second one, with role conflict, when employees don't know exactly what role they're given, or they start to feel less satisfied with their job. They start to feel less satisfied, which means that they're not being as effective as possible because there's so much conflict. And also that creates tension. And when there's high levels of tensions, it also contributes to less efficiency, because there's just more focus on the conflict, the tension, rather than the actual work that needs to be done by that employee. So that's why it's very important that managers and supervisors and coworkers are all in the same line, and the role has been clearly identified to that employee. And that will also help those commitment levels, right? Because if someone is in conflict, tensions are high, that employee is probably not going to be very committed to the organization. But when their role is clearly identified and they're given assignments that are in line with the role that they were hired for, those commitment levels can also go up as well. And then the last one, with role ambiguity, you basically really want to make sure that an employee has been clearly told what their expectations and objectives are, because they're going to be more confident about the work that they're doing. And if they're more confident about the work that needs to be done, the accomplishments that they need to be, they're going to be more effective, efficient, and they're going to be more committed to the work that they're doing as well. So that is how the writers of this article discussed how stress management and employee performance and the different concepts that they identified under each framework correlate with each other. And now at the end, some of the recommendations that they made for managers and organizations was to make sure that the tasks and the requirements that are being expected of employees are measuring up to a strategy that is helping employees be effective, efficient, and committed to the organization. And part of that was discussing how organizations and managers need to constantly be adapting to a changing environment, which I actually found to be very interesting, considering how this year with COVID-19, a lot of organizations had to switch to transition to that work at home setting, and that came with a lot of stress for employees who have small kids at home, who didn't have the setup to be working at home, and all the tensions that came out of that transition. And so I thought it was very interesting that they did mention that organizations have to adapt to those changing environments to help keep managing those employee stress levels. So I personally know my organization has done a really good job with this transition at home and really checking in on employees to make sure that we're maintaining a good work at home environment. So now that I discussed the findings of the article, I do want to discuss how this applies to my current and future career and the takeaways that I personally had from it. So in the current role that I'm in now, I'm not in a leadership or a manager position, but that doesn't mean that I didn't find good takeaways from this article. So I definitely think that the next time I'm feeling stressed out at work, I can definitely stop to analyze and ask myself, okay, why am I feeling stressed out right now? Is it because of the amount of work that I need to be doing, or maybe I'm just not sure of what I'm supposed to be doing, or my manager didn't explain this to me clearly, or what if I'm being assigned different tasks that I'm not trained to do, and maybe that's why I'm stressed out. So I definitely think that this is going to help me in my current role, just to reflect when I'm feeling stressed and how I can have those conversations with my manager so that she can help me cope with the stress, or like I said, just guide me through it so that I can start handling my assignments better, and then hopefully continue to be effective and efficient with the work that I'm doing. Because as I mentioned earlier, I am very committed to my organization. I do love the company that I work for, and I want to continue working for them, and I don't want a reason to be fired. So I do have a strong loyalty and bond with my organization. So that's how I can apply it to my current situation. In the future, I definitely think the next step for me might be more of a leadership position. So when I do step into that leadership position and maybe start managing a team, my concentration for my master's is in project management. So if I start to manage projects or a team, I definitely want to be that manager that is checking in on my team and making sure that they aren't feeling stressed. And if they are feeling stressed, then being able to talk through it together and identifying where their stress is coming from, whether it's the workload or conflict, or there's unclearness within the assignments or the project. I definitely want to be the type of manager that's going to take a moment to reflect and be aware of my team's stress levels and how I can better manage that, because obviously how effective and efficient my team is going to be a reflection of who I am as a manager. So I definitely want to make sure that I am managing my teammates' stress levels well, and that's kind of how I think I'll be able to apply it in my next position, hopefully. Beyond that, if I ever do get to a manager position in the future in my career, I definitely think that this is going to be extremely useful as well, just because, like I mentioned, stress is just a part of life. It's a lot of employees experience stress, and it's being able to handle that stress that will determine how effective and efficient a person can be. So as a manager, I know I'm going to have to be able to handle employee stress levels and also my own stress levels, because managers get stressed as well. So I think the information in the article that I just read and explained is also going to be helpful to me if I ever do get to that manager position and being able to manage stress levels well. I've definitely learned a lot from my manager, because I think she does a great job at handling the stress levels within my team. And another thing to point out is that every person handles stress differently and approaches stress differently. So I think a good manager is also needing to be able to identify how people on their team handle stressful situations, and being able to have those conversations in an appropriate manner with those different people and different personalities as well. So that's something that I definitely want to be able to take away and implement if I ever do get to that manager position in my future career. So overall, I did find this article to be very interesting. I found the concepts to be understandable and easy to implement, even in my current role. Even though I'm not in that leadership or manager position, I still want to be performing at high levels. I want to be effective, I want to be efficient, and I want to be committed. So that's why I feel that I'm able to take away the information that I learned and start applying it in my current position. And if any of you are interested in reading this article or talking to me about it more, I'd be happy to share the link, or just talk it through with you again. So you can just reach out to me via email or send me a message on Blackboard, but I would definitely be happy to discuss any questions as well, or any follow-up questions that you might have for me. I'd be happy to discuss, and feedback is welcome. So just please share anything that's on your mind. I'm very open, so just let me know, and hopefully you took some takeaways as well and found this presentation to be interesting, and the concepts to be interesting as well. So thank you for your time, and I'll hopefully be talking to some of you soon. Bye.